I never imagined that being underestimated could feel so routine that you stopped noticing it. Until the day someone looked straight through me, like I was furniture, and everything changed. It started on a gray Monday morning, the kind that made the city feel heavier than usual. The elevator mirror reflected a woman most people never really saw. Plain coat, scuffed flats, hair pulled back because it was easier than caring. A translator, important but invisible, useful but replaceable. That was how they treated me anyway. So when the email arrived, I almost ignored it. Urgent request, private translation assignment, high discretion required. No company name, no assistant CC'd. Just a time, a hotel address, and a signature that made my stomach tighten. She. Not a name, just she. I almost laughed. I'd spent years translating contracts worth millions, smoothing negotiations between people who thought power came from how loud they spoke. Yet this message felt different, controlled, precise, like someone who never explained themselves because they didn't have to. The pay listed was triple my usual rate. That should have been my first warning. The hotel was not what I expected either. Not flashy, not branded. It stood quiet and immaculately clean, tucked between corporate towers like it didn't need to advertise its presence. The kind of place where people arrived unnoticed and left remembered. At the front desk, the receptionist glanced at my shoes before my face. Deliveries use the side entrance. I'm not a delivery, I said evenly. I'm here for a private meeting, suite reservation under. She cut me off, name. I hesitated. I wasn't given one. Her lips tightened. The line behind me shifted impatiently. That familiar heat crept up my neck, the one that came every time I had to justify my existence. Just as she opened her mouth to dismiss me, a voice spoke from behind. She's with me. The air changed instantly. The receptionist straightened. Of course, my apologies. I turned, and for a moment, the entire lobby faded. She stood tall, composed, dressed in a tailored coat that looked effortless in the way only real power does. Not flashy, not loud, just certain. Her gaze met mine, not over me, not past me, direct, assessing, curious. I'm glad you came, she said. No handshake, no small talk, just truth. That should have been my second warning. Inside the elevator, silence pressed between us. She studied the floor numbers like she already knew where we were going. I studied my reflection, suddenly hyper-aware of everything I was, not polished, not wealthy, not intimidating. You don't look like most translators, she said finally. There it was. I'm not sure what that means, I replied. Her lips curved slightly. Good, it means you won't perform for them. Them. She glanced at me then, eyes sharp. The men who assume the loudest voice wins, you've dealt with them. It wasn't a question. The elevator doors opened to a private floor. A single suite. My pulse jumped. You mentioned negotiations, plural. They'll arrive tomorrow, she said. Tonight is for preparation. I stepped inside and froze. The suite wasn't staged for comfort. It was staged for strategy. Documents spread across the table. Multiple languages, financial statements, legal frameworks. The kind of material that separated people who played business from those who owned it. She removed her coat and placed it carefully on a chair. You were recommended to me as invisible, she said calmly. Someone people underestimate. I bristled, invisible. She turned unflinching. That's not an insult, it's a weapon. No one had ever said that to me before. We worked for hours, and slowly something shifted. Every time she paused to listen, really listen, I felt myself straighten. Every time she nodded at a phrasing choice or adjusted strategy based on my insight, something in my chest warmed. She didn't interrupt, she didn't correct, she trusted. Around midnight, there was a knock at the door. Room service. The waiter glanced at me like I was an assistant. Where would you like this set, ma'am? Before I could answer, she spoke. Address her properly, she said coolly. She's the reason tomorrow won't bankrupt you. The man flushed, stammered an apology, and left quickly. I stared at her. She didn't look pleased, she looked unsurprised. They'll do worse tomorrow, she said. They always do. Why me? I asked quietly. She met my eyes. Because they'll dismiss you, and while they're busy doing that, you'll dismantle them word by word. Something in her voice made my breath catch. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt dangerous. But power has a way of revealing truth and testing boundaries. As the clock edged closer to morning, exhaustion stripped away pretense. We spoke more freely, about backgrounds, about being overlooked, about learning early that respect was something you earned alone. You know, she said softly, they assume I'm ruthless because I don't smile. And they assume I'm harmless because I do, I replied. Her gaze lingered on me then, long enough to be noticed, not long enough to be explained. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged. I stood to gather my notes. We should rest. Yes, she agreed, then paused. You can take the second bedroom. I hesitated. You're trusting me a lot for someone you met today. She smiled fully this time. I trust competence, she said, and kindness. That night, lying awake in unfamiliar sheets, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't just here to translate words. I was here to translate power. And tomorrow, someone was going to learn the cost of underestimating the wrong woman. The room where respect was tested. Morning arrived without mercy. The city outside the hotel window glowed with ambition, steel towers catching the sunrise like sharpened blades. I stood by the conference table, documents arranged with deliberate precision, my notes marked in 3 languages. My hands were steady. My heart was not. She entered the room already composed, as if sleep had been optional rather than necessary. There was something different about her now, sharper, colder. The warmth from the night before had folded itself neatly behind armor. They'll be here in 5 minutes, she said. Once they arrive, you don't exist unless I ask you to. I nodded. I understood the game. The door opened exactly on time. 3 men walked in first, suits expensive and confidence louder than their footsteps. Behind them trailed a woman, assistant, maybe legal counsel, already burdened with folders and the expectation to stay quiet. Their eyes moved past me like I was part of the furniture. Ms. Laurent, the tallest one said, flashing a rehearsed smile, didn't expect such a small team. She gestured casually toward me. This is my translator. One of them chuckled, for English. The others laughed politely. I lowered my gaze, playing the role they'd assigned me. Inside, something hardened. The negotiations began. They spoke quickly on purpose, overlapping, interrupting each other, peppering their language with idioms meant to confuse. It was a test, one I'd seen 100 times before. Power loves to disguise itself as speed. She won't keep up, one of them muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. She didn't look at me, she didn't defend me. Instead, she said calmly, proceed. So I did. I translated everything, not just words but intent, every hidden insult, every veiled threat, every assumption that she was cornered. When they realized she was responding flawlessly, strategically, their smiles thinned. Interesting translator, one of them said. Where did you find her? She finally met my eyes. She found me. Something shifted. They pushed harder, numbers flew, pressure tactics escalated. One leaned back and said, let us be honest, without us this deal doesn't happen. Silence. She turned to me, translate this carefully. She spoke slowly. Tell them, she said, that I walked into this room already owning the patents they're trying to leverage. Their laughter stopped. I translated. Faces drained of color. The tallest man slammed his folder shut. That's impossible. She smiled, thin, lethal. You should have read the footnotes. They argued among themselves, voices rising. For the first time, they looked at me, not past me. One pointed, did you know this? I met his eyes evenly. Yes. That was when respect entered the room, not invited but unavoidable. The meeting ended early. As they left, one muttered, next time we bring real opposition. She waited until the door closed. Then she exhaled. You were flawless, she said quietly. I felt something warm spread through my chest, not pride, validation. But as we gathered the papers, her phone buzzed. She read the message once, jaw tightening. They're not done, she said. They don't like losing, especially not to women they underestimated. I looked at the closed door. Neither did I. When silence became a threat, the hotel felt different after they left. Not quieter, tenser, like the walls themselves were listening. She closed the door slowly, locking it with a deliberate click that echoed through the suite. For the first time since morning, the steel in her posture softened. She loosened her cuffs, rolled her shoulders once, then turned to me. "They'll try another angle," she said. "They always do." I nodded, though unease had begun to coil in my stomach. I'd seen this pattern before. When powerful people lost control in public, they searched for private ways to reclaim it. We didn't have to wait long. An hour later, the hotel phone rang. She answered on speaker. A voice I recognized immediately, the tallest man from the meeting. Smooth now, friendly, almost apologetic. "Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot," he said. "We'd like to continue discussions, informally, dinner, no translators needed." His emphasis was unmistakable. Her eyes flicked to me. "She stays," she said flatly. A pause, then a chuckle. "Of course, if you insist." The line went dead. I swallowed. "You don't have to." "I do," she cut in gently. "Because this isn't just business anymore. It's about how they think power works." Dinner was held in a private hotel lounge. Dim lighting, polished wood, the kind of place where deals were whispered, not signed. The men were already seated when we arrived. They stood for her. Not for me. One pulled out a chair halfway, then stopped when he realized it wasn't for her. I remained standing until she sat, and only then did he awkwardly finish the gesture. "I'll stand," I said calmly. His mouth twitched. The conversation turned personal quickly, too quickly. "So," one of them said, swirling his drink, "how does someone like you end up translating for someone like her?" "Someone like you." She didn't intervene. This time she watched. "I worked for people who underestimated me," I replied evenly. "They paid well for the mistake." A flicker of irritation crossed his face. Another leaned in. "You ever think about doing more? With the right connections, loyalty can be rewarded." There it was, the offer wrapped as a test. I felt heat rise, but not fear. "I already do more," I said. "I just don't announce it." They laughed, but it rang hollow. Halfway through dinner, one of them made a call, voice low, but not low enough. "She's just a translator," he muttered. "Pressure her, she'll crack." I met her gaze across the table. She stood. "I think we're done here," she said calmly. "You've made your position clear." The tallest man smirked, walking away already. "No," she replied. "I'm ending it." She placed a folder on the table and slid it forward. Inside were documents I'd helped prepare, proof, signatures, dates. "You tried to sideline the wrong person," she said, nodding toward me. "She negotiated this entire counterdeal through 3 subsidiaries you didn't even realize you were speaking to." Their faces drained again. "You lied," one hissed. "No," I said softly. "You assumed." Silence fell like a verdict. As we left, I felt their eyes on my back, no longer dismissive. Calculating. Back in the elevator, my legs finally trembled. She reached out, not touching, just close. "You okay?" I nodded. I think they're afraid now." Her lips curved slightly. "They should be." The cost of underestimation. Sleep didn't come easily that night. The city lights blinked outside the window like watchful eyes, and every sound in the hotel hallway made my pulse jump. Power never retreats quietly. It waits, it plans, and after dinner I knew they weren't finished. By morning, the consequences arrived. My phone buzzed repeatedly, emails, messages, missed calls. At first, I ignored them, focused on organizing documents for the final negotiation. But when I finally looked, my stomach dropped. My translation firm had suspended my access. No warning, no explanation, just a cold, automated notice. I stared at the screen, hands shaking. "They went after you," she said from across the room. Her voice wasn't surprised, it was controlled fury. "They don't even know me," I whispered. "They don't need to," she replied. "They just need leverage." A knock came at the door. Hotel security. 2 guards stood stiffly, eyes avoiding mine. "Ma'am, there's been a complaint. You'll need to vacate the premises." I laughed once, short and incredulous. For what? Disruptive behavior, one said. Allegedly. She stepped forward. Alleged by whom? She asked. They hesitated. We weren't told. She nodded once. Then you can leave. The guards exchanged looks, uncertain. She picked up her phone and made one call, spoke 6 words, hung up. 5 minutes later, the hotel manager arrived, pale, apologetic, sweating through his collar. There's been a misunderstanding, he said quickly. Please accept our apologies. The guards vanished. I stared at her. Who are you? She met my eyes, someone who hates bullies. But the damage was done. I sank onto the sofa, the weight of years pressing down on me. They'll ruin me, I said quietly. My career, my reputation. She knelt in front of me. They can't, she said firmly, because they don't own the truth. She handed me a folder. Inside were contracts, offers, names I recognized, global firms, institutions I'd only dreamed of working with. I've been watching you, she said, not just translating, thinking, strategizing, leading. My throat tightened. I want you with me, she continued, not as my translator, as my partner. I looked up stunned. In business. In everything that matters, she said softly. Before I could respond, her phone rang again. This time she smiled. They're calling to apologize, she said, and to beg. She put it on speaker. The voice on the other end sounded smaller now. We may have acted prematurely. She didn't answer. She looked at me. I took a breath and spoke. We decline, I said calmly, but thank you for the lesson. She ended the call without ceremony. In that moment, something shifted permanently. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was unstoppable. When power chose a side, the fallout was immediate. Within hours, the emails that had frozen my access turned into apologies. Vague, carefully worded, fear disguised as professionalism. My firm wanted a conversation. They always did, after someone powerful intervened. I didn't respond. Instead, I stood beside her in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the city. The same skyline that once made me feel small now felt earned. They're watching, I said quietly. Good, she replied. Let them learn. The final meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. Same men, same hotel, different balance of power. This time they stood when we entered. All of us noticed. One of them extended his hand to me. I didn't rush to take it. She'll be leading this discussion, she said, nodding toward me. Shock flickered across their faces. They masked it quickly, but it was there. I sat at the head of the table. My voice didn't shake. We're here to clarify boundaries, I began, and consequences. They tried to interrupt. I held up a hand. Translation is unnecessary today, I said calmly. I understand you perfectly. Silence. I laid out the timeline, their intimidation, the hotel complaint, the call to my firm, each detail precise, documented, undeniable. You assumed I was expendable, I continued. That mistake will be expensive. One of them swallowed hard. What do you want? I met his gaze, respect in writing, and a public acknowledgement of misconduct. They balked, threatened, tried one last power play. She leaned forward then. You already lost, she said softly. You're just deciding how visible it will be. They signed. When it was over, the room felt hollow, like a storm had passed through and taken something rotten with it. Back in the suite, I finally exhaled. I was terrified, I admitted. She smiled. You were brilliant. There was a pause, a different kind of silence. You know, she said carefully, you don't have to stay because of loyalty. I stepped closer. I'm staying because I choose to. Her breath caught. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the courage to stand beside someone and be seen. The moment justice became personal. The world didn't change overnight. But my world did. In the days that followed, the story spread quietly, boardrooms, law firms, investment circles, not gossip. Warnings, names attached to consequences, doors that had once been locked now opened without me knocking. My former firm issued a public statement. So did the executives, carefully phrased, legally sound, but everyone who mattered knew what it meant. They had underestimated the wrong woman, and the other one standing beside her. We moved out of the hotel that week, not in defeat but transition. A new office, a new venture, my name on the documents this time, not buried in footnotes. The first time someone called me director, I didn't correct them. She noticed. "Still getting used to it?" she asked, smiling. "I spent years being invisible," I said. "Visibility feels loud." She reached for my hand. "You control the volume now." That night we stood on the balcony of our new place, city lights stretching endlessly below us. No suits, no strategies, just truth. "I didn't plan this," she admitted. "You." "I didn't either," I said, "but I wouldn't undo it." She turned to me then, not the composed executive, not the strategist, but a woman who had chosen courage over comfort. Neither would I. The kiss that followed wasn't rushed. It wasn't hidden. It carried the weight of everything we'd survived and everything we'd claimed. Weeks later, I was invited to speak at a conference about ethics, power, language as leverage. I stood on that stage, microphone steady in my hand, and saw faces that once would have dismissed me. They listened. Afterward, a young woman approached me, eyes bright with recognition. "They never take me seriously," she said quietly. "How did you do it?" I smiled, not because it was easy, but because it was earned. "I stopped asking to be seen," I said, and started deciding who deserved my voice. From the back of the room, she watched me, pride unmistakable, respect absolute. Justice doesn't always come as punishment. Sometimes it comes as alignment, as choosing each other, as building something so solid that no one can shake it again. When the world finally looked back, success has a strange echo. Long after the applause fades, it leaves behind questions about who you were and who you're becoming. I felt it everywhere now, in meetings where people listened too carefully, in emails that began with praise instead of doubt, in rooms that once ignored me and now went quiet when I spoke. Power had shifted, but power also attracts resistance. It came disguised as opportunity. An international consortium reached out, massive funding, global reach, prestige written into every sentence. They wanted me, not as support, not as a consultant, as the face of a new initiative. "It's generous," I admitted, reviewing the proposal late one night. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "It's calculated." They wanted to separate us. I could feel it in the language. They praised my independence, my solo rise, my individual brilliance. They never mentioned her, never mentioned us. "They're offering everything I was denied," I said quietly. "And asking you to forget how you earned it," she replied. That night doubt crept in, the old kind. The voice that whispered that survival meant choosing yourself, even if it meant walking alone. The next morning, I met the consortium representatives. They smiled too easily. "We believe you've outgrown your current partnership," one said. "You don't need protection anymore." I folded my hands. "You're right," I said calmly. "I don't." Relief flickered across their faces, too soon. "But I never needed protection," I continued. "I needed respect, and you just proved you don't understand the difference." Their smiles collapsed. "I didn't rise by abandoning people," I said, standing. "I rose by standing with them." I walked out without looking back. When I returned, she didn't ask what happened. She already knew. I nodded once. She exhaled a breath she'd been holding. "Thank you." "For what?" "For choosing alignment over applause." Weeks later, we launched our foundation. Language access, ethical negotiation, advocacy for people whose voices were ignored because they didn't sound powerful enough. The response was overwhelming. And one evening, as we locked up the office, I caught our reflection in the glass. Two women once dismissed, now impossible to overlook. I smiled, not because the world had finally changed, but because I had.